Hey, I'm going to call this meeting of the Salem City Council Legislative Committee order, and we'll say who's present. Bennett,
Boy,
Anderson,
And Keith.
and staff to be identified. Okay, why don't we go ahead? Nikki, do you want to go ahead and kind of give us an update as to what's going on?
Sure, I'll just introduce myself. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Nicole Holmes. I work with Justin Martin at Perseverance Strategies, and we're lucky to work with all of you folks at the City of Salem. So Justin was unable to attend today and asked me to provide a brief legislative update. He's the expert, so I'll answer questions as best as I can, but I'm also not shy to say I don't know an answer, and I'll get back to you. So the first special session of 2020 convened on Wednesday, June 24th. The Senate is currently on the floor. The House is in recess until 12:30 p.m. today. As of last evening, the House had passed 5 bills. The Senate looks to be working through things pretty quickly. The original plan was to have session for 3 days. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It looks like they're going to sine die this evening at some point by the pace that they're going. So sticking to their original plan. It's a really strange makeup. Public is not allowed in the building. Legislators are social distancing as best they can. They are holding in-person work sessions, and everyone is wearing a mask. It's really hard to hear them. So it's been challenging, but we're working through it. Legislation introduced is focused on COVID-19 relief and public safety policy. However, there are a few packages that include opportunities for local government. Like I said, it's hard to track bills right now because of the way that amendments are coming through and they were voted. The Joint Committee met until 9:15 last night, and things were coming in on an hour's notice. And so what Justin and I will do is, once sine die occurs, we'll put together a comprehensive report of the legislation introduced and passed during the special session, with a special highlight on bills that impact local government. That's it. Happy to answer questions you have.
One that I'd gotten a call about, and I don't really know its status, was sort of an extension, I think, of 4001 from the regular session on citing homeless shelters. Do you happen to know how that's doing or what's happening with that?
The citing, actually, I did take a note last night. The criteria for expedited citing with additional citing associated with it. You know, I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, it's one I know will be in your report. I just wondered if you happen to know the status of it.
Yeah, it was in a package, and the citing was, the speaker talked about it last night, late into that hearing. So it is in an amendment. So I'll make sure that we report back on that.
But it's moving along.
I believe so. I believe that the bills that were introduced are all moving along.
Okay.
In some form. There have been some amendments. I know that some police accountability or police related bills the policy is now going to a work group, amendments that created a work group. So things are changing just a little bit, but definitely things are moving forward. We are not going to have a walkout. Policy will pass.
can you tell us what the current status of the police reform bills are? Like, and what are the details that are still there? I know there's been changes.
Yes, so I can't tell you where each of those bills are. Actually, I know that the police accountability bill passed the Senate this morning.
And
I
what
can't.
does that mean? I mean, I haven't read the details of that. What are the basic tenets of that bill?
Okay, let me pull up my report here. I apologize.
Nicole,
Yes.
I wonder if we could supply the legislative concepts as they maybe started, knowing and understanding that there's been a lot of shift, but I wonder if that might be a good place to start, or you know, at the committee's preference, or we wait perhaps a week to have all of this kind of tied together so we have a better status update about where things are. Which way would you guys like to proceed? Because we can supply what we started the special session with for sure.
Well, I read the concepts. I'm familiar.
Yeah, I've read the concepts as well.
Okay. Okay.
My understanding is that those there were changes on the tear gas, loud noise, allowing it if you declare a riot. If the police declare a riot and provide notice, you continue to have tear gas and the noise issue. I see Debbie Aguilar's here. She may know better. And that the question of investigations by the Department of Justice is moving into a committee during the whatever interim arrives here because of funding and staffing issues the Department of Justice has and concerns that probably were shared by unions and the chiefs. Those are the two big ones that I read. Have you seen those, Chris?
Yes, I just didn't know what the current, I know there's been amendments and different things. I just didn't know what the current status was, or what amendments had survived or not survived.
My impression is all the bills were moving through. They may have had, those were the major amendments, but my impression is all of those are moving through. Nicole, do you happen to know? I mean, there were like 6 of them.
Yeah, there were 6 of them. My impression is that they're all moving through. To what extent they're moving through in their original form, I'm still catching up on.
Debbie, do you happen to know?
All I know is from what I've seen on the legislative website, which does show, like, for example, the one involving CS gas or tear gas, that you are correct in that there were some amendments such as police are still able to use it. However, there are some pretty strict controls on when, such as what constitutes a riot, how many notices we have to provide, time sufficient to allow folks to leave the area prior to the agency using that. But my understanding is, from what I can see, it looks like all of the proposed legislation for the police reform packages are moving forward. However, there are some different changes and amendments almost on each one of them.
How are you guys analyzing that then? Didn't look like much of it was going to have a tremendous effect on the way you all operate.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, the police, the Sheriff's Association and the Police Association has reviewed all the legislation, and they've provided some proposed language changes to most of the bills. But yeah, the majority of the bills either don't change how we operate because we currently operate that way, or will require some minor modifications. But otherwise, they don't really change much of what we do already.
Okay. Chris, is that, you'll get a report, understanding you're going to be real interested in the details, but.
That's fine.
Is that fine? Okay. Tom?
Yeah, that would be my understanding too. And thanks to the lieutenant for telling us. But even if it was something that we didn't like, it's a little late for us to try to change it at this point. So, I mean, I'd be happy with the report from Nicole and Courtney that tells us what went on, because we can't change anything now. We're not going to rush over there, and the city of Salem is going to ride in and make changes.
No. Okay, Nicole, we'll look forward to it. Any other questions for Nicole? Great. And you say the report will be ready next week. Is that the idea?
As signing day occurs today, I'll get to work on it and it'll be early next week.
Great. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Would you collectively like to gather again to talk through the report?
Yeah, I think it's one that will also inform us as we talk about these issues ourselves for action by council. So I think it's going to be important that at least there'll be 4 of us that know what happened at the state level and
Agreed.
be able to interject that into the conversation. Is that,
Agreed.
yeah, okay.
Good.
Yay.
We'll scan some calendars and try to find a good time next week before the holiday.
Great, thank you.
The next thing on our agenda is to walk through some of the legislative priorities, and this is a follow-up from your meeting when we last gathered. We discussed, I think that's the next thing on the agenda. It is lovely. We discussed some legislative priorities from last session and some other ideas that align with the council's policy agenda. And we talked about whether or how you would like to consider those things for the upcoming session. Did everyone have a chance to see that list?
Yes.
Good, okay. So it has the drinking water capital projects on it, which is a repeat from last session. It has the navigation center operations funding, also a repeat from last session. And then it has a statement around COVID-19 recovery resources and how we hope or expect those resources are equitably distributed across the region, as well as hoping and expecting that any shifts in the state's budget wouldn't necessarily impact state shared revenues or some of the other resources that local governments rely on. There's also a statement, the last statement has to do with mental health resources, and that is just another area of priority that aligns well with the council's policy agenda.
Okay. Any questions on that, or do you need action from us to continue that agenda back to council again?
Yes, if you'd like to. I don't know how much of a rush we're in on this. It would be for the interim or any other upcoming special session, as well as the next session if we were to do it sooner. Typically, there are a couple other things that I think we typically forward to the whole council in advance of the session, and we could be ready to do that on July 13th if you wish, if you're comfortable today approving that set of policy priorities.
I would prefer to wait until we have a better sense what happened in this special session, and to really, in case there's somehow we want to adjust moving forward. It won't take us much time, but I'd like to at least know what happened this time before we say what we should be doing next time.
Maybe that could be included, Chris, if this makes sense to you. That could be included in this discussion of the report. We'll get a report. We'll be able to analyze it in looking at this, and be able to keep providing Justin with our opinion, because we're going to change it, I'm sure, as we get closer and closer. If events continue to move at the pace they're moving now, there may well be other issues we'll want to take into either another special session or to the regular session. But if you need a reaffirmation, we could do that, I think, probably at our next meeting after we've had a chance to see the report. Would that be?
Yeah.
You want to make a motion then? Or no, I guess we don't need to. Why don't we just hold off on this until we have this next meeting, if that's okay?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Good. Can do. Another thing that we like to try to do is have our legislative policy statements, and that serves as a great foundation for us to respond and react to topics within a bill really quickly and efficiently and effectively during the session. If you'd like to pause on that as well until after we talk next week, we can do that. We did supply it in track changes, and I just want to notice that there was a larger infrastructure statement that we added to the list of sometimes we were being so responsive to individual issues, we missed the bigger picture about wanting to ensure that we have some infrastructure funds available. We also added the statement about COVID-19 recovery resources, and again have a larger kind of bigger picture statement around local planning priorities. So those are just the most immediate changes, and we can certainly until we meet again to further consider those statements and whether additional topics need to be added.
I think it makes sense to do it all in one package.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it really, it would seem almost pointless to do it now. And then if we wanted to adjust it again, I'd rather do it all in one fell swoop if we can.
Good. The last topic today, if you'd like, is around the League of Oregon Cities policy priorities. And just by way of background, this comes to us every other year in advance of the long session, and we're asked to weigh in. We have to weigh in before August 7th. So again, not a sense of urgency around it, but an opportunity as long as we're meeting to consider them. The priority lists, usually it feels very similar in preparation for every session. This one has a little bit of different features to it. So we wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about them. For one, the alphabet's only one time through the alphabet, which is unusual. Usually they end up doubling up letters because there's so many things to choose from. And then some of the priorities from 2018 are not featured in the same way. So when we scanned as staff the list, we found two priorities that are solidly in the frame of the conversations we've been having and in the council's policy agenda. And those two things are the item D, which is the COVID-19 economic recovery investments, and item Q, the mental health service delivery. We need to come up with 4 priorities for Salem. And if you'd like, we can spend our time now discussing the others that you'd like to incorporate, or if those 2 are on the mark or not quite on the mark. We're welcoming conversation and trying to get that before the full council based on your recommendation.
Well, those 2 sound like they'd be right at the center of our agenda, the concern over the recovery from COVID-19. And really, I think this emphasis on mental health is one that we're hearing regularly. So from counselors. So those 2. What do you think, Tom? You ranked everying.
Well,
except for Y, the ZZZ. I'm still working on.
Oh, that means forget it. It was as low as I could go.
Okay. I thought you meant it was a snoozer.
Yeah, well, it kind of is. I mean, now I'm speaking more personally than as part of the city. I've got some concerns about tort liability limitation legislation, just from a legal standpoint. So yeah, I ended up with 6 A's out of the 20, 25. And one of them was certainly the mental health service delivery. That seems real consistent with our priorities. I had the COVID economic recovery thing. I had that as a C, but I could also see, I wouldn't object to getting forward. If I could just tell you what my A's were.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
And then I don't know, we could almost do some sort of weighted voting. And if we're going to have another meeting, perhaps we could rank them somehow so then we could see where we are. But the 6 I had as A were the building reach code. And Mayor, you just signed a letter about that. That's more energy efficient sort of situations. The next one was expedited housing, that's F, expedited siting for shelter and affordable housing, which I think is also.
That seems to be coming through during the special session.
Yes. And so maybe, and then housing and services investment, again, the same sort of situation. We need housing. Then local climate action planning resources. That's another one of the priorities we've had. Then mental health services delivery, which we already talked about. And property tax reform. I mean, we're getting raked over the coals compared to Eugene, which is a city that has the same population, et cetera. But I can understand how that's sort of tilting at a windmill. And then that was it. I had a couple. The one was B and A, which was right-of-way franchise authority preservation. I would just like to see that. When we've talked about this before with Ryan Sink, it just seems to me that it'd be much better. And we're doing this project downtown for free Wi-Fi access, and I'd love to see us be able to expand it outwards. So that's just where I am on this. Everything, you could look at every single one and say, this is all good, but we've got to, they want us to pick 4, which is why I think some sort of weighted voting might be helpful.
Chris, did you?
So I guess I took a little different approach. I like the two A's that we already have, and I would add H and U. Basically the housing and then the property tax reform. I know that it's a perpetual, but it's the critical thing that needs to be addressed. And so I think it needs to stay on top of our priority list.
So in effect, Chris, we're agreeing with everything except I can't even find what it is now, but H maybe? Yeah, no, the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
Of your 4 and my 4 or my 6, 3 of them agree.
Yeah.
I think the COVID, I would agree with the COVID primarily because I'm watching up close how those resources are being distributed, and that equitable distribution becomes real problematic as the metropolitan area sucks up the money, and trying to keep ourselves in the. I'd like to see the league, and I think it's something that's really good for the league to work on because it does represent such a broad spectrum of communities and different kinds of need. But that one I think is going to be, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like as it goes into a regular session, whether it continues to be an overriding issue, which may mean we could drop it at some later date. Well, they'll drop it at some later date and pick something else up. But right now, it just
get
feels
into a
critical.
year of this thing. If we go a year into this COVID situation, which I'm sure we will, I think it's going to stay a priority for a while.
Well, the thing that we've been doing, at least at this point, in terms of the city's planning, if you kind of look what their strategy has looked like, it really has been being in place and ready to be participants as this moves forward. There were the initial investments, but it's going to be that long-term investment is going to become a real problem for businesses, keeping money in the pipeline and the money relevant to the kinds of problems they're facing. And the league could have could be really helpful. I think we'll be there kind of no matter what, because it's just going to be confronting us. Yeah, Tom.
I'm interested as to what Brad has to say, because it seems like the 3 of us who have spoken, we're agreeing on, well, I'm not agreeing on COVID, but the other 3 were all the same, which is property tax reform, mental health services, and I can't, the third one, whatever it is out of the 4. What were the third 3, Chris,
Housing.
you had? Pardon me?
Housing.
Yeah,
Housing.
So we're all in agreement on that. And so maybe Brad, if you think those 3 things are good, then we're just really discussing about the 4th priority.
Yeah, and I'm good with all 3 of those, and COVID, we still don't know where it's going. So we need to make sure that,
based on the fact that the mayor's already signed the reach code building letter. So we're sort of,
We're in.
Yeah, we're already, our position is known. I'd be agreeable to the COVID one being the 4th one.
Great.
So we've got
Could
now the 4
Do
tops.
we forward this then? Courtney, do we forward this, or what do we do to council?
We typically do. We typically send it to the whole council as a way to affirm the decision, the recommendation of the legislative committee. And so we would just be letting the whole council know that you're interested in responding to the league's policy priority survey with the D, COVID economic recovery, Q, mental health, H, and U, the property tax reform. And we can do that right away and hold off on the rest of the legislative committee's recommendations until after we reconvene next week.
Well, it would it'd make us responsive to the league and give
Yeah.
them, would everyone be okay with those 4 then?
Yep.
Everybody okay? Yeah, why don't we forward those to council for the July 13th meeting, and will let us then respond to them in advance of their August deadline.
Excellent. Thank you so
Great.
much. So in terms of next steps, then we will consult everyone's calendars and try to find the best time and day. Are we flexible around, if we need to, can we flex out of the lunch hour just to try to get everyone together? Excellent. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Everybody okay?
Well, we're no longer getting catered lunch, so why, who cares now?
Yeah.
So we'll get on that, and you should see a calendar appointment and probably some consultation before we settle. Thank you so much.
Is there anything else you'd like to, we've got staff here, if you had any questions on anything that you wanted to discuss with them. All righty, then we're adjourned.
Great.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good weekend.